Okay, so have a great day, everyone. Today we are going to talk about the discussion about the principles of learning. So this is a very important topic, when it comes to the educative process, the teaching and learning process. We are already done with the discussion of the teaching principles, and this time we are going to have the learning principles, the different principles of learning, the laws of learning, and when we can say that a certain individual are able to learn, how does learning occur, when we can say that a certain learner able to grasp an information, the information that been transferred by the teacher to the learner were able to grasp by the learner. So on how are we also encourage our learners to learn. So these things that we are going to discuss for this day session about the principles of learning will really realize us, to give us a realization as future teacher on how are we going to deliver the instruction in order for our students to learn. So allow me to share my screen on the topic about the principles of learning. Just a few moment for now that I will be able to share the screen. Okay. So by this time we are going to discuss about the different learning principles of different theories and laws of learnings that we are going to discuss. Okay, so last discussion we already done with the physical environment. Those discussion about physical environment is also integral when we deliver a lesson. So for this time, I'm going to discuss about the principles of learning. So from the word itself, when we talk about the word principle, there are different words or different association that could be associated with the word principles. No, the word principle could be associated to the word foundation, no, guidelines, or a basic foundation, as I said, no, guiding principles, no. And, okay, so I hope that the slide is already available. For this time, we are going to discuss, okay, the principles of learning. By that, no, I would like also to inform everyone that the PowerPoint presentation, the source of this is coming from the slide share, to give credit to the one who make the presentation. But I think the content are good enough to elaborate the discussion about the principles of learning. So let's define first what is learning. I already gave the definition or a clear understanding of the word principles. For example, when we have a subject of principles of marketing, we're talking about basic marketing. No? When we talk about principle of language, we're talking about the guidelines or the foundation in order to learn a certain language. Now we are talking about how to learn. We are going to learn how to learn. No? That's confusing, no? Because a learning process is a very rigorous one. No? We can, as a teacher, as a future teacher, it is our task, our job, to identify if our learners able to learn. No? So what are the parameters? What are the indications? And how it is implicated in the learning and teaching process. So by that, after our discussion, you will be able to understand the principles of teaching. The second outcomes that we are going to discuss, that you are going to expect to learn, is the to talk about the different laws of learning. No? When we talk about laws of learning later, we will elaborate that how law differs to principle or theory. Okay. So by that, let's define what is learning. A simple definition of learning is an acquisition of knowledge-based use with the fluency to make sense, to make sense of the world, solve problems, and to make decisions. So that is a very basic definition that really involves a huge impact to its definition. No? There are different terms that being used. No? Number one, acquisition. When you say acquisition, it's from the root word itself, acquire, to get. No? Second word is knowledge base. It is a single word, knowledge base. No? All information that being processed by our brain, meaning the one who process the learning is our brain. No? There are segments of information that our brain is only allowed to process. A bit of information. No? In education, there are different ways on how to learn, different guidelines. How are we going to deliver learning? What are the types of learning that we want to incorporate to the child, to the learner's mind? So number one, it's a knowledge base used with fluency. Therefore, there is an existence of learning when a certain individual have a fluency of of something that we acquire. So you are fluent. For example, if you are learning a language, if you want to learn a language, of course, the evidence, no, the evidence is the fluency. If you are fluent and if you are good in speaking the language, for example, we our subject matter or our concern is learning a certain language, of course, we need to have to fluency. For example, we're learning a certain subject area, for example, mathematics, division, subtraction. If you are fluent with that skills or that knowledge, that becomes a learning. That is one of the indications of learning. Aside from that, another impact of this definition is with fluency to make sense of the world. So this is a very huge praise, no, or information that would be associated with the word learning. There is a sense of the world. Sa maning sense of the world, bukat kayo, no? The purpose. How did you use your learning? Another term is solve problems. So it's not only mathematical problem, a real life problem that occur in our life. Now, if you can find basic solution, no, that is why not we are not only teaching the basic information of a certain subject area, but it's implicate its application to real life. No? We want our learners to become a life skill learner. No? When you say a life skill learner, of course, the learning that we learn or acquire in the four corner of the classroom when we are in the physical classroom is being applied into real life if we can learn how to solve problems that really occur in our life. No, it's all about solving problems, not only mathematical, situational problem, but a lifelong learning. And of course, making decision. No, because some of us, no, you as a learner, have a difficulty in making decision. Now, we want to inculcate into the mind of a certain individual, a learner, to become decisive. No, because that is one of the loopholes of our learners right now. No, they sometimes fail to decide, or they find it difficult for them to decide a simple decision in their daily life. No, not only in the educative process, because this is what we want in the classroom. Because the classroom are just a training ground. It's a laboratory of life. Remember that the classroom, either online class, virtual classroom, or a physical classroom, it is just only a what we call laboratory of life. When you say laboratory of life, practice. No? This is where we practice the skills that we acquire, and the real battle, the real scenario, the real learning that we need to apply is in our real life. But these are all process of learning in the classroom. We are being disciplined. We are being exposed to different situations. That is why when your teachers are making you hard of your assessments, your tasks, or whatsoever school activities, it is only the way of teacher of trying or disciplining you to become prepared in the real battle of life. That's learning. No? That is why when you can say learning, when there is a learning in your life, no, or in your subject area that you want to learn, that superficial definition of learning, that acquiring, memorizing such information that you are only you are given by your teachers of that kind of activities, and then you able to perform, and then you can say that there is learning, no? So there are ways of different ways on when you can say that you have learned something, because there is a need to apply in that learning to different field, to different endeavor, especially in our daily life, no? So to make a diagram or a framework in order to make a summary of learning. So there are five, in the box. To make it simple, it's an accusation of knowledge based information. When you acquire something, means you are learning. But after acquiring and then you forgot, and then you cannot perform anymore the learning that you acquire, that's no longer learning. That is why there is fluency. How fluent are you when you acquire that certain knowledge or certain skills? Okay. The third one, make sense of the word, the importance of the learning that you want, that you acquire from the virtual classroom, the physical classroom. So how does it make sense in your daily life, especially in the world that you are living? Okay. Of course, the learning that we learn from classrooms or whomever we acquire that learning is very applicable in our daily life, like solving problems. Though we are keep on asking in our math teachers, no, we are asking them how this math equations are being used in our daily life, when in fact we don't need this kind of equations, formulas, no. But I believe those are all disciplining factor. You are being exposed of different problems, no, especially mathematical problems. In my case, also I also have that. I find it difficult also when I experience in my high school year, in my college years, that I also hate mathematics. But on the process, no, I have learned something. I have my realization that those are all a challenge, a disciplining factor that we can apply in our daily life, and it will really help us to make decisions, no. So I just want to focus on the topic, on the word make decisions, because most of us learners or individual in this real world, we have difficulty in making decision. Even in a simple decision, we find it more difficult because we are not exposed to this kind of situation to make a decision. Now, how much more in a very huge or a big problem for us to make a decision, because we are not exposed. So I think it is good enough that our teachers, you as a teacher, you expose your students into these different problems for them to make decision, to make sense of the world, and of course, the things that they have acquired must be fluently performed or exhibited in the different endeavor of our life. So that's learning. Now, there is a large scope of the definition of learning, not only for the four corner of the classroom, but what is important is the application, the transfer of learning, the application of learning into our real life. That is what we want to our learners right now, especially in the 21st century. No, a 21st century learner must possess the 21st century skills, different C's, no, the four C's, the seven C's. You know that you have a background on that, no, the communication skills, the collaborative, no, collaboration. We have also if you need to have this computer literacy, of course, the different mga important na mga skills that is applicable in our life, no. Our learners must be a lifelong learners. Okay, to proceed, there are different pang discussions, like another term is inert ideas. What is this? These are ideas that are merely received by the mind. No? Our brain is composed of different cells. We have the brain cells. No? If you still remember in your biology class, in your psychology class, how information is transferred to one brain cell to another brain cell. We have what we call the neurons, no? The synapse, the axon, no? If you still remember that one. These brain cells are interconnected. They transmit such information, electronic information. No? There are electricity in our mind, in our brain. No? And that is why our brain is very powerful. So sometimes when our brain becomes sa tinawag pa nga natin kung ito ay kinakalawang na, we need to exercise our brain, no? Because if we are just keep on receiving information or ideas without processing it, without applying the information that we got, of course, that makes us useless ng atong learning, no? So it is being utilized. Of course, the learning that the things that we absorb from our mind must be utilized, no, by our mind. Of course, mo na nga training ginasaya. So inert ideas are ideas that merely received by the mind without being utilized. So mababaw lang ni when we do not use, when we are not tested, and it is just overthrown into fresh combination. So kung dili na magamit, no, pag hindi ito ginagamit, therefore our brain becomes may experience a problem in processing information. Our brain is like a machine that needs to be used every day for us to process information. Imagine there are huge of information that our brain needs to process. So how this learning information being transferred from a short-term memory to a long-term memory. Later, we have some discussion on that. No, we have loss of learning. In order for us, especially that we are now in the time of taking the examination, the online exam, and whatsoever, when you need to study, you need no. We have the loss of learning that we have discussed in order for you to process in such information, because our mind may only process a bit, a segment of information. We cannot process all information, no? Like it's a universal serial bus, no? Or USB, or device that will save all information, no? Mabayrusan gid gyapon siya. There is a chance that mabayrusan, no? So there is a question here. Is memorizing without understanding considered learning? So I would like you to give your comment, no, on the comment section, to give me your idea on the question. Is memorizing without understanding considered learning? So I would like and love to read your comments, your opinions, and your ideas about the question. So let's proceed. Let's have the learning of principles according to the study of Hearn and Pine in 1990s. In 1990. So learning is an experience. According to them, it is an experience. Why? Every experience that you have becomes your learning. That is why, have you asked yourself that when you visit a certain place that makes your visit memorable, is when you experience a good experience, no, a memorable experience. When you are when you are accommodated in that such place, you can you can easily remember, or it will become a remarkable event in your life, in your experience. So learning is an experience. Take note of that, no? Which of course inside the learner, and it is activated by the learner. So who wants to learn? It's only the learner. The responsibility of learning is in the learner. The learning experience will only occur if the learners wants to activate and of course experience such experience, no? For him, siya po ang maka-activate. Only the learner can activate the learning. That is why during examination, it is only solely the learner may activate the learning that he had, and he was when he is being tested, like examination, oral recitation. That is the time that you need to activate the learning that you have. So that is why it's an experience. So when your teacher asks you to recite, to have an oral recitation activity, or to write you something in your assessment, when you are asked to write essay, when you are asked to write a task, therefore, you will going to recall such an experience that you are exposed to and activate that learning. Number one principle, learning is an experience. Number two, learning is discovery. Hmm? What does it mean? So dapat, ano ang dapat gawin as a learner? Of course, you discover by yourself. The teachers are there to facilitate the learning. It must not be a spoon feeding learning process, because if it is a spoon feeding, there is no discovery there. There is no excitement when you are not curious. No? When you are very inquisitive, remember, when you are inquisitive, when I say inquisitive, you are keep on asking questions, you may discover things. And then that will become learning. So discovery of the personal meaning and relevance of the ideas. So that is why when you are asked to give your insights, those are your discovery based on the learning process. Another term, learning is the learning is a behavioral change. When there is a change of behavior in the consequence of experience, there is an existence of learning. So these principles will tell us that there is an existence of learning when these are being evident. Learning means there is a behavioral change. It's not about attitude and behavior. When we say behavioral, there is something that change from your actions. For example, when you are a child, you don't know how to speak, but you are being exposed on the different speaking activity. Your parents taught you how to read, how to speak, how to write. When you experience that one and you practice that one and there is fluency, therefore there is a behavioral change. No, do not limit yourself on the term behavioral change, because probably you will be telling about that behavioral change meaning change of behavior. No, behavioral change meaning there is something that have changed to yourself from your skills, from the acquisition of learning, all no from the experience that you from the first point that you don't know how to write, you don't know how to hold a pen, and such time you, because of practice, constant practice, exposure of those of that activity, you know how to write. No, you already know how to write, so that becomes a behavioral change. Another one, learning is a cooperative and collaborative process. There were studies telling us that a learner learn a learner or a student learn at best when they are in a work group, or when they are working with a group, or when they are collaboratively working, when they cooperate with their group mates. So that is why no, there is our experience. We would like our teachers to make an activity which is by group. We keep on requesting of our teachers that the activity should be a group activity, because we can work together. But sometimes it is being abused. No? The loopholes or the negative effect of having always a cooperative and collaborative also is sometimes the students are very dependent with the group mates. Sometimes the group leader or the one who is excelling in that group will be the one assigned or tasked to do all the things. And sometimes most of those members are no longer cooperative. Another, no, there are a lot of learning principles that will really help us. So I hope that you can reflect on this. No, that when you can say that you are learning. Another principle is learning is an evolutionary process. When you say evolution, change. Now, for example, when you talk about the evolution of human being, now, there are different changes, physical, mental, and other changes that happen in your life, in your body, in your structures, sa imong lawas, o uban pa. It becomes a learned evolutionary process. It goes development, no? Because the word evolutionary may also be grow, no? Kani, this one. Learning is sometimes a painful process. Why do you think it is a painful process? So I would like you to give your idea on the comment section also, to say to tell us your experience, why the learning process is sometimes a painful process. I know that you have some experience. Probably you can share that one in our comment box, the comment section. I would like to read and to appreciate all your comments on that. Another one learning is one of the richest resources. One of the richest resources of learning is the learner himself, of course. Who is responsible of learning? It's not the teacher, because the teacher is just a facilitator. But in the traditional manner, sometimes the teachers are the one who are the source of information. On that point, today in a modern education process, we always consider that the learners are the main source of are considered to be the richest resources of learning. No, he is responsible of learning. Himself is responsible of the learning that he or she wants to learn. Another one, the process of learning is emotional as well as intellectual. So it also involves emotional, psychological aspect in our life. No, sometimes we don't like to learn. We don't like to listen to our teachers because you are emotionally affected. You have you have a negative feelings towards a scenario, a situation. So that is why probably learning is emotional also. The another one, the process of problem solving and learning are highly unique, no? And individual. So meaning it is not tailored fit. Remember this one. The learning process is not tailored fit. The learning strategy of a certain learner or student is not always the same with another student. We always consider the diversity of the different type of learners that we have. Remember the discussion about the multiple intelligences, the learning styles. We have different style of learning. That is why the problem solving process, oh, for example, in mathematics, we have different ways on how to solve. We have different techniques and strategies for us to solve. Although there is a format, there is a formula that we need to follow, but sometimes there are some students who like to solve problems by their own, by this kind of strategy. Therefore, learning must be customized. No, kani. Please take note of this statement that the learning process must be customized. You as a teacher must understand the need of your students. So customize the learning. It is not tailored fit, no? It is not one size fits all type of learning. It is the same with leadership. When you lead with different people, individual in your workplace, they have different needs. Same with the learners. Our learners have different needs. This one, this quote, this is very interesting. No one teaches anyone anything of significance. No? No one teaches anyone anything of significance. People learn what they want to learn. So that is why we cannot force our students, no, in the traditional ways of learning. We would like our students to learn this in this way. No? If you still remember your teachers, in elementary or in past few years, in the old times, no, in the siguro in the previous time, we are obliged and we are forced. But the positive thing is we are being disciplined. No? As of today, because there are a lot of freedom, sometimes we cannot force our learners the way that we want them to learn. So people learn what they want to learn in their own. They see what they want to see and hear what they want to hear. So there are a lot of freedom here, no? Wanna see. So now we are talking about the loss of learning. I hope this is now our focus. So how we differentiate a law and a theory. So let's start. A theory means it is a basis of a certain explanation of a certain phenomena or event. Theory may help us explain a scientific existence of a certain event. Theory may serve as our foundation of giving an insight of a certain phenomena or a certain thing. No? It may be true to you or it may not be true to you. So in science, we're talking about theory, probably the theory of the creation of human being. There are different theories on that. The theory of the beginning of the world. No? So there are different explanation. There are different bases. It may be true. It is just a proposition. It was been offered by the different theorists. No? For example, in research, there are theories that we need to present in order also to explain our result of our study. But when we talk about laws, it's not laws that it's all about regulating body or the government. No, laws here are being associated of a certain phenomena which is already proven, tested, and undergo scientific study. Therefore, when we hear the law, the word law, laws of learning, the law of gravity in science, there is no other explanation other than what is being explained on that law or that principle. Meaning, it is true to all. Theories, it may be true to you, but to others, it's not true. But when you hear the word law, laws, it is a universal truth. It's a universal and it is accepted any place in this world. So the law of learning, explanation of the law of learning in United States is the same. It is the same explanation of law of learning here in our country, Philippines. So if the law of gravity is being explained in US, the way it was being explained by the one who explained, it must be the same explanation of any other place in this world should be explained on the way it should be explained according to its guidelines and principles. So laws are universally accepted principles. It should not be distorted. It should not be explained in another way around. So laws of learning are proven already. This is true to all. So let's start. Of course, there are different proponents of laws of learning. Of course, one of the most famous one is Edward Thorndike. So he had this undergo different studies, experiment of laws of learning. Of course, when they experiment about learning, they are using animals. And in science, we are using our animals as a representative. Usually, it's a rodent, no, or what we call a rat, no. So according to Thorndike, is in the early years suggested that there are several laws of learning that seem generally applicable in the learning process. This laws provides the teacher with insights into learning process. So if you want to become a teacher, one of the laws, one of the things that you need to consider is to familiarize the laws of learning so that you can apply this one in your classroom, in the online class, virtual class, or whatever, whichever place that you are now when you are a teacher. This laws provides the teacher with insight into learning process that will assist you in providing rewarding experience to the learners. There are three laws being first basic na mga laws that was discussed on in Thorndike's laws of learning. Number one is the law of readiness, the law of exercise, and the law of effect. No? So the law of exercise, I think it was being introduced to you earlier in this course being discussed. But we will discuss this one into a very detailed discussion in order for us to understand the laws of learning. Okay, the other three laws were added, no? Mga law of primacy, law of intensity, and the law of recency. So the part one, the basic law of readiness, law of exercise, the law of effect. The other were added the law of recency, the law of primacy, and the law of intensity. Okay, let's proceed so that we can understand the different laws of learning. So this is also good for those who are reviewing, no, for the licensure examination for teachers. Because in the licensure exam, it is always a situational, no, scenario. Okay, are you ready for this? That is for readiness. The word readiness is ready. Individual learn best if they are physically, mentally, emotionally ready to learn, and they do not learn if they see no reason for learning. That is why, in our own explanation, in our own of context, when there is a child who is not yet ready to be sent to school, we must not force them to go to school. But it is very far different from the scenario that we have in our setting, in our culture. No? When you reach the age of 4, you must be sent to a primary school. That is our culture. Although the child is not yet ready physically, mentally, emotionally, but the other one, the other child from your neighbor who makes a comparison with the child that in your house, no, probably that is your child, your son or daughter. You may compare that one to other daughter or son in your neighbor. Probably will tell us they are in the same age. Therefore, you must be sent to school, and that is a wrong notion. As I said, no, the individual has its own differences. We grow physically, mentally, emotionally differently. So we as learner, you don't if you don't want if you cannot see the reason of learning, of course you are not being forced to learn. Now, if it is not in your mind that you're gonna learn this one, no, you're gonna learn this one, it's not in your mind already. Therefore, we cannot force you to learn. No, you need to even though that you are already matured, no, you're physically matured, mentally matured, but when you are not yet ready on that learning, because physically you don't want to attend a class, mentally your mind are now are your mindset is not yet on that point, and then you are emotionally challenged, of course you cannot really learn. Now when you watch this video, no, probably I don't want to watch this because I'm not yet ready physically, mentally, and emotionally, because I'm a I experience broken heartedness right now. So that's therefore there is no motivation, no one pushes me to learn. So that is why that is law of readiness. In other country like in Japan, no, when their children are not yet ready to school to learn, they are not forcing their student or their learners. Unlike in our country, when you are 6 years old, 7 years old, and when your parent know that the other 6 and 7 years old of your neighbor already go to school, you are being forced without assessing mentally, physically, emotionally, no, your own learning, your readiness. That's the law of readiness. When you are not yet ready to learn on that point, no, dili gid ka maka-learn. You can never be able, and you can never learn on such thing. For example, when you're forced to proceed to another topic, the sense of difficulty, the level of difficulty that we need also to consider. It's very impossible for us when you are already when you are in grade 1 and then you are exposed with algebraic expression in your mathematics subject. Instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, your teacher will expose you to algebraic expression. How would you like to learn on that? You are not physically, mentally, emotionally ready on that. So do not force a lesson which is not yet ready for that kind of learners that we want. Because sir, we need to finish this one because we are running out of time. So that is why sir, you need to discuss all of these things. The law of readiness will contradict on that idea. We cannot force someone. No, we cannot force a learner to learn when they are not yet ready. That's the law of readiness. The second one, this one, the law of effect. There is an experiment here. No, as I told you earlier, the effect of learning, the law of learning. The learning is strengthened when accompanied by a pleasant or satisfying feeling. When there is it also involves emotional, no, emotional aspect of the learning process. No, when there is a pleasant and satisfying feeling, the effect of learning is there. No, you really learn because there is a pleasant environment. There is a motivation. You are being reinforced. No, learning is weakened when associated with unpleasant feeling. No, when you are emotionally stressed. No, when you have different problems. No, Mona, when you are in school, remember that the time that we are in the physical classroom, when there are unpleasantness in the environment, in the atmosphere, and within yourself, you have identified issues, conflict, of course, there is no effect. There is no acquisition of learning. I think that's a very simple explanation. Now, there is an experiment where designed to determine if animals solve a problem through listening or by more basic process. Thorndike experimented with baby chicks, dogs, cats, monkeys, and fish. A puzzle box was used to get each animal to trip a latch. The animals would claw, bite, scratch, and claw against the sides of the box. Repeated of confinements decreased the time it took for the animals to escape the confinement. No? So, mo na siya. So grabe nilang paningkamot diha ano, kung dili unpleasant ang ilang environment, no, kinahanglan gid sila nga mo survive. So the famous one, no, this is already been discussed to the class, no, the law of exercise. From the word itself, exercise, practice. In order for us to remember things, to acquire more learning, that is why in the process of learning in the lesson planning, there is always an item or a segment or a portion where there is always a conduct of the previous topic. That's the law of exercise, the drill, no? Things most often repeated are best remembered. Remember this one. If it is being exposed to you several times repeatedly, you can easily recall. There are a lot of examples on this. I know we find it difficult to memorize a certain contact number. No, you are given right now. You're only given 5 seconds to memorize the certain contact numbers, or 917705123 for example. Then I would like you to ask to repeat it after 5 seconds. It is very impossible to you to recall or to give me that such details of the contact number properly arranged and in exact order, because it was not being repeated to you several times. That is why there is a need for us to review your lessons, scan your notes, note taking. If there are more exposure of a certain text, you keep on reviewing on it repeatedly, of course, that thing will be remembered. If you will be studying on the day of the examination, of course, it's very impossible for you to recall information that you needed. Now, you cannot utilize it. One, you cannot really activate the learnings that you learned from the previous time because you are not exposed. You do not do the law of exercise. Why we are able to memorize a song lyrics, which is very common right now when there is a new release of a song, which we know that it's very unfamiliar because that's a foreign language. The language that being used is foreign language like Korean. But why we were able to sing it exactly, the lyrics, pronounce it exactly, because we keep on repeating the lyrics, although it's difficult for us to pronounce or sing the song with the exact lyrics, because we are experiencing the LSS, no, the last song syndrome. When you say last song syndrome, this is a very unique term, no, in the social media, no. Everybody are using this one. When you are LSS, when you experience the LSS or the last song syndrome, meaning the last song that comes to your mind always being repeatedly you are recalling such information. You keep on singing the lyrics of the song. You will repeatedly utter the lyrics of the song, although you do not understand the meaning of the song, but you can really easily remember all the lyrics of the song because you repeatedly sing the song. No? Without practice, there is no knowledge. When your teacher asks you to memorize a poem, of course, it's difficult for you to memorize a 12 stanza, more than that, because if you are only given a very short time, of course, it will not be successfully being remembered by your mind. Remember that our mind may only process such information, bits of information, no, which is enough only for us time that is given to us. That is why we need more time to repeatedly review all the information, scan your notes, open your notes, you write down, jot down, and of course, I suggest to make a note taking. Do not only rely on the recorded lessons. No, this is just a tip for everyone. No, in order to recall when you take board exam, I know that you will be able. You are going to take the exam, board exam. The technique is note taking. Make an outline, although it is being written several times, as long as that is what we call conditioning. No, there is what we call the law of learning, the conditioning of Ivan Pavlov. No, the law of conditioning, the law of learning, the operant. I know that you have that one in your psychology class. So without practice, there is no knowledge according to Paulo Freire. Additional law or principles, I think another three. We will just only focus on these following laws of learning by Thorndike. And let's have another discussion on the other laws of learning by other proponent. That is why it is very difficult for us to acquire such information, huge information in our mind, from the short-term memory to a long-term. There are different processes, no? In order for us to establish the short-term to the long-term memories, there is constant practice. There are different guidelines in order for us to establish the long-term to short-term to long-term. And in between with that, there are several factors that really affects the learning process. So that is why we cannot force we need to study this within 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. So I do not suggest that you study within 5 hours, 6 hours, more than that, 3 hours, because that is no longer advisable. Remember, our brain may only process a segment, a bit of information, which is only allowable during that such time given period of time, because you cannot force yourself to study. That is why you are cramming when the examination is fast approaching, and the day before the examination, that's the only time that you study your lesson. It's very impossible to you to recall according to the law of exercise, the the principles and laws of learning, because I told you there is a need for you to practice. Why we have this kind of experience with our students here, no, when we have our physical classrooms and physical face-to-face classes, they are required to memorize the vision mission of the school, but it become more easy for them to memorize because all subject teachers in the first week of the class, they are keep on discussing, exposing the vision mission of the schools. That is why nagsasawa sila, no? Sabi nila, balik-balik. But the reason behind that, why every teacher is required to repeat the lesson about vision mission, not only to give not only for them to memorize, but when we are always exposed to such information, sometimes it will tell us that we need to inculcate this one, the law of exercise. No, the law of exercise is what we need. For example, you are learning how to play guitar, piano, all types of learning. It will not come in just a struck, a single step in a single time. You are expecting that you will learn in a few moments only. That's very impossible. The law of exercise must be there. Without practice, there is no knowledge. In order for you to learn bicycle, how to ride the bicycle, how to drive the bicycle, a motorcycle, or a four-wheel car, there is always a practice or the law of exercise. Anything that we want to have to learn, influency, there is a need for us to practice. That is the best advice that I can give to every student. Every student that would like to take a board exam, a written task, and everything, and memorization. No? So here comes another additional laws of learning, the law of primacy. Still, this is part of law Edward Thorndike. So the law of primacy, from the word primacy, things learned first create a strong impression. No, the first that you have learned may always be remembered. If you try to recall, when was the first time you learned how to ride, to balance a bicycle? I think you cannot forget that one. The first everything, the first encounter, first experience will always be remarkable for you, will always be memorable for you, and you cannot forget. The first that being introduced to you will always last, no? First impressions last. No, there is a saying on that, no? But actually, in the process, no, it talks about personality in that statement. The first impressions last. So the primacy, the present, the first skills that you have learned may always be remembered. No? For example, when was your first experience of this? When was your first experience on that? And that becomes that will last forever. No? So, ang mga first, dili na malimtan. For example, having a first boyfriend, first girlfriend, first breakup, those are all memorable event. Although it is embarrassing, remarkable, or whatsoever description that you will have, that would always be remembered. The second additional is the law of intensity. Intensity, when it's not intense, the more intense the material thought, the more it is likely learned. No? When we give emphasis on a certain topic, for example, a teacher would like you to learn the strategy or the computation of permutation and statistics, for example. Sige, let's go to mathematics on how to solve this equation. So the teacher will keep on repeating on that and giving much time on that. That will help you to remember because the teacher gave intensity and emphasis on certain topic. No? Like, nagibutan na rin museum. When you go to museum and all of our time is being spent on museum, of course, there is an intensity. For example, we are talking about Philippine history. Now, we are talking about the first mass in the Philippines. Of course, there is a conflicting information about the first mass in the Philippines, rather either in Limasawa or in Masao in Butuan. And then your teacher exposed to you in Masao. Of course, you will give the idea that it's in Masao because you are exposed to that place, no? To that educational tour, and you were not able to go to Limasawa. Of course, it will really give us an impression that you will learn on the process, which is when you are exposed to such intensity. That's law of intensity. This is a very common. This is a very self-explanatory type of law of residency from the word recent. The last thing that you remember, the most recent item, the most recent information that been exposed to you are always being remembered. No, earlier we discussed about primacy. The recency is also being remembered. No, pinakauna, the first, and the last. That is why in our cell phone number, now if you try to observe this one, we can easily recall the first four number of our contact number. And of course, the last three digits of the cell phone number are always remembered. Diba? Have you observed that one? The first three or four digit of a contact number of a certain individual may easily be recalled because of the law of primacy. And of course, the last three digit of that certain number may always remembered because of the law of recency. The last number being exposed to you. Okay, the additional one, the law of freedom. Things freely learned are best learned. When you are not forced to learn something, sometimes I could still remember our parents. We are forced in every day that we need to write our name from blue to blue to red, and the entire pad, entire pages of the paper, the entire daily routine from the morning to afternoon. We keep on reading different reading materials, no? Although we don't have the freedom because we are being forced, but actually we have learned from that. But the best things freely learned are the best learned. Sometimes when they are forced, we cannot consider that one as our best learning. Of course, we are not using our will. No? When we freely learn, when we are freely exposed, we freely experience the things that we need to learn. Those are being the best experience in our life as a learner. So the last statement before we end, because there will be another topic. The last quotation from Benjamin Franklin, and I will also give my realization. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. I know that you have encountered this quotation about learning, no? So meaning the more exposure, the more involvement that we have in the class, in the learning process, the more learning that we will have. When we are exposed, no? When we are only told by our teachers to do this, to do that, of course there is a less exposure and probably there is a less learning. And when our teacher will teach us and just tell us to remember all of these principles, no? Please remember that the laws of learning are the following: law of readiness, law of effect, law of exercise, and the other additional is the law of recency, the law of primacy, the law of freedom. So if we are only doing that, Of course, we don't have the more chance of learning because we are not involved. When we involve ourselves, no, when we are not forced, when we expose ourselves to the process of learning, of course, there is much more learning that we will have. No? So, in my realization for this topic, for this loss of learning, I know there are different ways, there are different ingredients, there are different recipes for us to learn. It will always be on our side as learner. It is always depend on the type of learners that we had. We are we have the idea of the diversity of learners. As future teachers, this is my take. We need not to uniform the instruction or the strategy. There is no one size fits all approach of teaching in order for us or in order for the learners to learn. There is a need for us to contextualize the learning. The examples must be the example situation of the lessons must always fit to the needs of our learners. Customize the learning process. Although it is very difficult, it's hard to customize the learning process because in our situation here in our country, Philippines, we have lot of number of students, different characteristic, different behavior, but it is our job as teacher to facilitate the learning of the different, of the diverse learners that we had. So it is our task, no? Let us encourage ourselves to do our task as future teacher to facilitate and customize the learning process. So I think that's all for this time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you have learned something from our discussion for today's principles of learning. Thank you so much and keep safe, everyone. God bless us all.